After breaking up, I decisively quit my job and prepared to go abroad to develop my career. But suddenly, my ex-girlfriend, who is also my former boss, suddenly showed up at the airport to win me back. She said she had fired her assistant and that from now on, I would be the second in command at the company. However, just when I had decided to give up going abroad to stay with her, she shook my hand off and called the assistant to flirt. "Santi, you won. This useless guy really thought I would try to keep him." She then sneered and said to me, "It was just a joke. Did you really take it seriously? If you want to leave, then go. This time, no one's going to stop you." The colleagues around us laughed at me, as if I were a dog who would turn back the moment she waved her hand. But what they didn't know was that the only reason I had given up going abroad was because my new company had just completed an acquisition, and I was going to be their new CEO. Chapter 1. When the CEO's ex-girlfriend, Margarita, proudly told me that the retention she had just made was just a joke, I wasn't offended at all. I simply took out my phone and ordered a taxi back to my place. The colleagues who were present looked at me with mocking expressions and sneered. "Stephen, the CEO already said she has no intention of keeping you. What are you still doing standing there? Aren't you buying your plane ticket to leave? Didn't you say you had an offer abroad? What's going on? Now they don't want you anymore." Margarita watched them indulgently, not stopping them from attacking me with their mockery. This kind of uncomfortable workplace harassment had surrounded me a few years ago. Back then, I would have responded, feeling deeply offended. My girlfriend, who was the CEO, never defended me, but now, I felt nothing, didn't even seem sad. I just felt like I was watching a clown show. "My business doesn't seem to concern you, does it?" I said indifferently. Margarita snorted disdainfully, looked me up and down with a look of contempt. "At this point, are you still denying it? With your capabilities, if it weren't for me supporting you all these years, you'd probably have no food to eat. Going abroad, what a joke." "Yes, I'm a graduate from a prestigious university. I left a high-paying job that many would envy. I was by her side since she started from scratch, but to Margarita, I meant nothing. It was because of her support that I could be where I was." I laughed inwardly. I once loved Margarita deeply. Even if, after years of struggle, I was still just a manager, I would never have complained. But it was only when she, because of a new assistant named Santiago, started taking my projects and giving them to him. She even blamed me for the issues he caused, making me carry the burden. And with that, she lowered my salary and suspended me, while promoting Santiago and giving him a raise. That was when I finally realized that this love, which I alone had maintained, was no longer worth it. So, I resigned and broke up with her, deciding to go abroad. But I didn't expect that, just as I was about to board the plane, she would come to make this joke. I wasn't sad at all, just surprised. How could I have been so blind to fall in love with a woman like this? I shook my head, not wanting to waste any more time with her. "You're right about everything. Can I leave now?" I turned to walk away, but suddenly, Margarita grabbed my hand, looked me in the eye, and said with disdain, "What a good actor you are. We already figured out that the excuse of going abroad was a lie, and now you're still acting. For old time's sake, I'm going to give you a chance. Come back with me. I'll make you Santi's assistant." Seeing her attitude of benevolence, I finally understood the true purpose of Margarita's joke. On the outside, it looked like a bet with Santiago to see if I would give up, but in reality, all she wanted was for me to stay at the company to continue being her servant, working for her and Santiago. There's no denying that Margarita had planned Santiago's future well. She promoted him, raised his salary, and sent him support. Meanwhile, I, who had worked step by step to help her fulfill her dream of being the boss, had everything taken away from me. She paved the way for Santiago without hesitation. I laughed in disdain. With Santiago's level, he doesn't even deserve my help. Margarita immediately tensed up. "Stephen, it seems I've spoiled you too much over the years. That's why you think you're so important." Before she could finish her sentence, suddenly, a figure appeared walking towards us. "Rita." Margarita immediately changed her tone and smiled sweetly when she saw him. "Santi." Santiago was the only person in the entire company who didn't address Margarita as CEO, but called her by her name in an intimate manner. Not even I, her legitimate boyfriend, had the privilege of calling her by her name. Santiago glanced briefly at me and smiled at Margarita. "Look, I told you. Stephen just said he was going abroad as an excuse." As expected, he didn't leave. Margarita threw me a disdainful look and said coldly, "There are people who think they're too important, thinking the company can't go on without them. Unlike Santi, who is so capable and humble. If he doesn't seize the opportunity, that's on him. Let's go." But Santiago stopped me, looking sad. "Rita, we still can't leave. Since Stephen resigned, I can't find my watch. That watch is a family heirloom from my grandmother." And suddenly, he looked at me and pleaded, "Stephen, please give it back." Before I could understand what was going on, Margarita glared at me furiously and said, "Steven, did you steal something?" Just as I was about to deny it, Margarita interrupted me coldly. "Don't keep denying it. Would Santi lie about this? Now you don't even have a job. Who knows if you're capable of stealing something?" She then ordered the others, "Open his suitcase. Search everything." I looked at Margarita, stunned. After 10 years of living together, she knew exactly who I was, and now, because of Santiago's baseless lie, she wanted to open my suitcase in front of everyone. At first, when she made that cruel joke, I didn't want to argue with her, but now, this almost bullying attitude really made me furious. It wasn't disappointment or pain. It was just rage and disgust. "Enough!" I shouted in fury, but Santiago feigned false kindness. "Why are you so angry, Steven? Could it be that it was really you, right?" Margarita looked at me with even more disdain and ordered 2 people to restrain me, saying coldly, "Don't worry about him. Keep searching." I watched as they turned my suitcase upside down, and my personal belongings fell to the floor. My anger reached its peak, and I shouted for airport security. Only then did they stop, embarrassed. "We didn't find anything," Santiago said, disappointed. "Forget it. Let's stop making Steven go through a hard time. He has his own stuff." Margarita shot me a deadly glance. Someone must have sold whatever was stolen, and with a sweet smile, she told Santiago, "Don't worry, Santi, I'll go with you to buy another one." As they left, Margarita shot me a final cold look. "Steven, when you're on the street, don't come asking me for help." With those words, she walked away with her entourage, and Santiago looked at me with a challenging smile. I said nothing, only laughed in my mind. They still don't know that the company's project is about to collapse, and it will soon be acquired. As for me, I gave up going abroad simply because the new company appointed me as the new CEO of this company. Chapter 2. My new company's headquarters is overseas, and it's a well-known multinational corporation. Back when I was about to graduate, I received an invitation from them because of my outstanding academic performance. However, Margarita persuaded me to stay and join her startup, so I declined the offer. Not long ago, I broke up with Margarita, and immediately after, they called me, offering me a job. Just as I was about to board the plane, I received a call from their subsidiary in China, announcing that they had decided to acquire the local company, which included Margarita's business, and to integrate resources, they had decided to make me the new CEO of the company. After dropping my luggage at home, I arranged to meet with the local head, President Kim. I arrived at the restaurant ahead of time to wait for him, but I didn't expect to see Margarita and Santiago there, chatting and laughing. When they saw me, Margarita froze for a moment, with a look of impatience. She walked up to me and said, "Steven, why are you sticking to me like a piece of gum? Didn't you act all tough just now? Regret it?" Before I could say anything, Santiago, who was beside her, smiled and said, "Rita, there were so many people just now. Steven must have declined out of face, right? How about this, Steven? If you apologize to Rita properly, she might still give you a chance to work. What do you think, Rita?" Margarita glared at me and pretended to deliberate. "Well, since Santi is pleading for you, it's not impossible. If you finish this bottle of wine, I might still let you be my assistant." She pointed to a bottle of wine on the table. I sneered inwardly. Margarita knew full well that I had a stomach condition and couldn't drink, yet she still set such a condition. It was nothing more than a way to put me in a corner, waiting for me to beg her. But she had miscalculated. "You're overthinking it. I'm waiting for someone. Waiting for someone. Heh, your mouth sure is tough," Margarita scoffed. "We've known each other for so many years. Don't think I don't know what you're up to. You must think it's humiliating to be an assistant to Santi, right? But in this day and age, how much is face really worth?" Just then, President Kim, the guest I had arranged to meet, walked over. He took the initiative to shake my hand. "Sorry, President Lee, for keeping you waiting." I directly ignored Margarita and shook hands with President Kim, smiling. "President Kim, let's talk inside. There are 2 flies buzzing around here, making a lot of noise." All right. President Kim agreed. Margarita looked at me in disbelief. I was about to walk into the private room with President Kim when I heard Santiago say to Margarita, loud enough for me to hear, "Looks like Steven has arranged a meeting with some headhunter to find a job." Huh. The next moment, Margarita suddenly walked up to block my way. With a sneer, she said, "Steven, you've really gotten bold. Huh. You'd rather find a job on your own than beg me. But I have to remind you, considering your previous performance at work, I've already spoken to all the colleagues in Linzhou. No one is willing to hire you. Now, do you regret it?" She looked at me with a mocking smile, seemingly waiting for me to turn back. But she was wrong. With Margarita's level of ability, she was no threat to me, and because of my departure, Santiago had taken over all major projects, and the company was now facing numerous risks. on the verge of bankruptcy, but she was clueless about it. I said calmly, Margarita, confidence is a good thing, but I hope you'll keep the same mindset when your company gets acquired after going bankrupt. Stephen, you, Margarita, furious, was about to curse at me, but she suddenly turned to look at President Kim. She pulled out a business card and handed it to him. With an arrogant tone, she said, CEO of the Sun Group, Margarita. Stephen was my former employee, and he was dismissed for misconduct. I suggest your company be cautious in hiring him. After finishing, she shot me a glance, linked arms with Santiago, and arrogantly left. President Kim frowned and looked at me, holding the business card. Just a clown, I said with a slight smile. President Kim casually threw the business card into the trash can. We entered the private room and discussed the acquisition of Margarita's company. We would make a big deal out of the Sun Group's project falling apart and seize the opportunity to buy it at a low price. President Kim also brought out a personnel list from the original company and asked me to help optimize it. I was well acquainted with everyone's business abilities and personalities, so I promised to provide a plan as soon as possible. After finishing the discussion with President Kim, I returned home, but as soon as I walked through the door, I saw Margarita sitting on my couch. She was crossing her fair legs, coldly staring at me. I couldn't help but frown. What are you doing here? Chapter 3. I glanced at the door in my house. Then I remembered that after our breakup, I had forgotten to delete her fingerprint from the system. Margarita didn't answer. Instead, she coldly said, "Who told you about the bankruptcy and acquisition of my company?" I was busy changing my shoes and didn't bother responding to her. Her face darkened even further. "As you wished, the company really did go bankrupt," she said. I raised an eyebrow, surprised at how quickly President Kim had acted. It was only noon, and by the afternoon, everything had been settled. Margarita continued, "Stephen, although I don't know how you found out about this in advance, don't get too happy too soon. This acquisition was done by a large corporation, and they'll help me address the problems from our previous projects. I'm still in charge of the company's management." I made myself a cup of tea, not at all surprised. Of course, I knew that. The reason the original staff was still in place was simply because my optimization list hadn't been finalized yet. "So what?" I asked casually. Margarita stared at me intently. "I want you to hand over the previous client resources to Santi, and I'll arrange for you to be a manager in the new company. You need to understand, with the help of the parent company, Sun Group will only become stronger. I'm offering you the manager position as a bargaining chip. It's already a pretty generous offer." I suddenly smiled. She said it so confidently, as if she were giving me a huge favor. But I knew all too well that after the company was acquired, President Kim would publish the development documents I had written. One of the key points was that positions in the new company would be based on individual ability. Margarita's request was just a way to use my previous client resources to let Santiago showcase his abilities and secure his position as vice president. I had to admit, her love for Santiago was deep, but unfortunately, she had bet on the wrong person. "Margarita, you're quite naive," I said. My words immediately made her face darken. She suddenly stood up and walked towards me, step by step. Her eyes bore into mine with a look as if she had figured me out. "Stephen, I know you're still jealous of Santi. You're upset, wondering why I changed towards you and am so good to Santi. But I hope you understand that our positions are no longer the same. I'm the boss, a capitalist, and you're just someone who works for me. A boyfriend like you is no longer compatible with me. But Santi, he brings me new experiences and the joy of being a woman. You can't compare to him." Margarita looked at me deeply, her voice unusually gentle. "I'm only giving you one night to think it over." With that, she turned and left. I shook my head helplessly. I immediately deleted her fingerprint from the system, then opened my computer and sent out tomorrow's layoff list. The next morning, I officially started at the company. When I entered, my colleagues were all chattering about the acquisition. Margarita, as usual, was painting a rosy picture for everyone. She claimed that she was still part of the management team, and if everyone worked hard, things would be just like before, until someone noticed me, and her gaze suddenly brightened. She walked up to me with a smug tone, as if she had expected this all along. "Have you come to your senses? Are you willing to hand over the client information to Santi now?" Chapter 4. I couldn't help but laugh and shake my head. Margarita's expression darkened, and she was about to say something when Santiago, who was standing nearby, laughed and spoke up. "Stephen, what's the point of this? Since you're not planning to hand over the client info, then what are you even doing here? Don't tell me you came here to actually work." His words were met with amused chuckles from the other colleagues. I raised an eyebrow and nodded. "I came here to work." Immediately, the colleagues who had gathered around started laughing at me. "Work? He's probably here looking for a job. Did he think just because our company got acquired, he could sneak in? Isn't this just a dream? Stephen, weren't you supposed to go overseas? How come you're here applying for a job? Ha ha ha." I was about to respond, But Margarita's face darkened as she sharply interrupted me. Stephen, are you done yet? I gave you a chance when I asked you to hand over the client data to Santi. Are you still being stubborn? Didn't you understand what I said yesterday? Do you want to be unemployed that badly? I shook my head helplessly. Margarita, you're the one about to become unemployed. You might want to start making plans. Margarita stared at me, then suddenly sneered. Look at this Stephen. Has he lost his mind? And now he wants me to make plans. How? I used to be the boss of this company. Do you think you can fire me? Stephen, do you believe that with me here today, you won't even be able to get a job as a janitor? Before she could finish, two people walked in through the company's front door. It was President Kim's team from the parent company, sent to help me restructure the company. Margarita recognized them, and her face changed immediately. She quickly forced a smile and greeted them. Chairman Han, you're here. I wasn't sure if our new CEO had arrived, but I'd be happy to welcome him. Chairman Han gave her a quick glance, but said nothing. He walked directly up to me and respectfully nodded. Then he introduced me to the others. This is our new CEO, President Stephen Lee. For a moment, Margarita's smile froze on her face. She awkwardly asked, Chairman Han, you're not joking, are you? This Stephen is just a useless, spineless person. How could you? Suddenly, Chairman Han pulled out the layoff list I had personally prepared the day before and slammed it onto her face. Pointing at her and Santiago, he coldly said, you two are being laid off. Pack your things and leave immediately. Chapter 5. Margarita picked up the layoff list in disbelief. After reading it, her face turned as white as a sheet. She stared at me with wide eyes, her voice trembling. How could this happen? Stephen, how could you be the CEO? Are you joking with me? Chairman Han furrowed his brows in annoyance, glaring at Margarita. Joking? Does President Lee have to joke with you? President Lee is an elite talent recruited through the headquarters, specially sent here to be the new CEO of this company. I'm well aware that President Lee was once your employee, but you were too blind to recognize talent. His words left Margarita stunned, unable to speak. Even the colleagues who were watching us from the sidelines looked at me with a mix of shock and disbelief. None of them had ever imagined that the person they had once bullied in the workplace would one day become their boss. In that moment, someone reacted quickly, rushing up to shake my hand. Stephen, I didn't mean what I said earlier. I'm sorry. It was all because President Mai told us to suppress you. Yeah, Stephen, I always thought you were the most capable person in our company. They all chimed in, apologizing and trying to flatter me. It was hard to miss the stark contrast between their previous hostile behavior and the desperate attempts to please me now. Of course, I knew they were scared that I might fire them too, since finding a job these days was tough, but I wasn't going to do that just yet. If I fired them now, it would seem like personal vengeance. Even if layoffs were necessary, they needed to be justified and legal to minimize losses. As for Margarita and Santiago, they were the biggest problems in this company and had to leave immediately. Margarita could tell that she had completely lost control of the situation. Panicking, she looked at me, then suddenly rushed forward, pushing past others, and grabbed my hand. Her voice was weak and pleading. Stephen, how could you be so cruel to me? I was your girlfriend for 10 whole years. I've always loved you the most. If I hadn't pushed you to leave, you might not have become CEO. Let's get back together, please. Looking at Margarita's eager eyes, I suddenly remembered how furious she had been when I accidentally revealed our relationship in the past. At that time, when our relationship was exposed and couldn't be hidden anymore, she had harshly ordered everyone in the company chat to avoid discussing it. To show how impartial she was, she even deducted my salary and performance bonuses for that month. Now, she was lowering her pride and publicly begging me to reconcile. It was clear that she was desperate. I couldn't help but sneer. Margarita, do you really think it's possible? That answer didn't need to be spoken. Everyone in the room understood it well. The grievances I had endured in this company made firing her 1,000 times over not even close to enough. How could I possibly reconcile with her? And let's not forget, there was still Santiago in the picture. Margarita, now desperate, looked at Santiago in panic and suddenly blurted out urgently, Stephen, the past was all my fault. I was too spoiled, and that's why I didn't know my limits. I'll change now, with you by my side. If you must fire someone, fire Santiago. It's him who's been stealing your credit, always slandering you in front of me. It's all his fault. Then, with a sharp glare, she turned to Santiago and shouted, Santiago, why aren't you leaving? You messed up last time, and Stephen had to take the blame for you. After Stephen left, how many projects have you ruined? You useless piece of trash. Get out. Chapter 6. The sudden verbal attack left everyone stunned, myself included. Santiago was especially shaken, his lips trembling and his eyes red. In disbelief, he asked with a quiver in his voice, Rita, you. Shut up. Don't call me Rita. I'm your boss. Margarita showed no mercy, cutting off Santiago immediately. I watched this scene, surprised, but somehow not entirely shocked. Margarita had always been a selfish person. She was highly concerned with her own interests. For instance, when I graduated, I had a very bright future ahead of me, but she had used our breakup as leverage, forcing me to join her in starting a business. Just because she wanted to be an entrepreneur and a boss, I had to give up my own future to accommodate her desires. Now, under the pressure I was putting on her, she had no hesitation in abandoning Santiago. Stephen, do you see my sincerity? I've always loved you. You can't fire me. This company is our joint effort. You can't just leave me. She looked at me with tear-filled eyes, her beautiful gaze shimmering with emotion. If this had happened in the past, I would have likely surrendered, thinking of her point of view. But now, I coldly said, both of you, get out. I'm not saying this again. It was working hours, and I couldn't waste time on personal matters. In the next moment, security immediately intervened, pulling Margarita and Santiago out of the office. Some colleagues quickly gathered their things and threw them out in front of the company doors to avoid getting on my bad side. With those two troublesome people gone from the company, I felt a little more at ease. Everyone, back to your stations. Make sure to send me this quarter's tasks before lunch. After making the arrangements, I returned to my office. Originally, this had been Margarita's office, and her things had been cleared away by the staff. Although this company was something we built together, and many of the items here were purchased by me, I had never really had the chance to come in. That was because Margarita had said, I'm the boss, and you're an employee. It's not appropriate. But when Santiago spent every day in the office, joking around with her, she never mentioned that reasoning. Never mind. It's all in the past now. I ordered new office supplies online. I wasn't going to use anything that Margarita had left behind. Around noon, a colleague quietly knocked on my door and came in with something to show me. Boss, this is something that happened at the company entrance. Do you want to see it? He handed me a video that had been secretly filmed. I clicked it open and saw Margarita and Santiago being dragged out by security. Both of them looked furious, clearly agitated. Santiago grabbed her, questioning why she had treated him that way earlier. Margarita, however, suddenly dropped her selfish facade, gently stroking Santiago's face, and said softly, I had no choice. We had to save one of us so the other could be rescued. But I didn't expect Stephen, that ungrateful bastard, to show me no mercy. Santiago still looked hurt, but his voice softened. Rita, is this really how you feel? Margarita cupped his face, giving him a light kiss on the lips. Of course, she spoke to him in a coaxing tone. Be a good boy and go back for now. I'll think of a way. Santiago suddenly pushed her against the wall, kissed her deeply for a long while, then gasped and nodded. The video cut off abruptly. The colleague, speaking in a hushed voice, said, Boss, you really need to watch out for Margarita. She's already betrayed you. We were all too scared to speak up back then. Margarita was the boss, and we were afraid she'd come after us. Actually, those two have been involved for 3 years. I was at a loss for words, unsure of what to feel. Everything seemed absurd. What had I loved all these years? What had I really been involved with? I didn't let the colleague continue telling me more. I simply asked him to leave, and then I turned my focus back to my work. That evening, as I was about to open my door to head home, a shadow suddenly flashed behind me. Before I knew it, someone grabbed me from behind, and hot, erratic breaths brushed against my face. Stephen, Chapter 7. The woman's voice was soft and seductive. Her hands were all over me, pushing me step by step into the room. Just as she was about to get closer, I forcefully pushed her away and turned on the light. Margarita stood there, disheveled and dazed, staring at me with a hurt expression. Stephen, what are you doing? A wave of disgust surged inside me. Yesterday, around the same time, she had sat on my sofa, waiting for me to return, threatening me to hand over client information. She had been so high and mighty then, but now, she was trying to seduce me with this kind of act. How many faces did this woman have that I had never seen before? Get out. But Margarita didn't give up. I won't leave. Stephen, can you really let me go? I love you. I've given you my youth. You can't be so heartless. You're just jealous of Santiago. Right, I've already dumped him. So why are you still acting like this? Had I not seen that video at noon, I might have believed her words. Of course, I had no intention of getting back together with her. I just felt that whatever she did, I wouldn't be surprised anymore. Margarita, we've already broken up. Can you stop bothering me? I held my temper and spoke to her, but Margarita started crying harder. Don't you remember the vows you made to me? You promised you'd love me for life. You said it yourself. Stephen, just forgive me this once. Just once. She then pulled a small box out of her pocket and opened it to reveal an exquisite watch. She looked at me eagerly. This watch is customized. I didn't give it to Santiago. I'm giving it to you. I'm giving it to you because you're my only man. The watch reminded me of the scene at the airport when she had someone force me to open my luggage. A cold shiver ran through me. I'll say it again. Get out. Margarita looked stunned, her face flushed with anger. She snatched the watch from my hand and spat out, "Steven, just wait." With that, she stormed out in fury. For the next few days, I didn't hear anything more about Margarita. After I took control of the company, everything started to run smoothly. With the support of the headquarters, many projects progressed exceptionally well. I also hired a few competent employees to help handle company affairs and fired the former colleagues who had been coasting along. That morning, after our regular meeting, Santiago suddenly called me. The moment I answered, he started shouting, "Steven, where did you hide Rita? What did you do to her? She's been unreachable. Her phone's off, and she's not replying to messages. You bastard." Chapter 8. I couldn't help but furrow my brow, my voice cold. "Are you a mad dog? Just barking nonsense? I don't know where Margarita is." He immediately denied it. "You're lying. Rita disappeared the night she went to find you. If you don't come clean, I'm calling the police." And with that, he hung up the phone. I couldn't be bothered to deal with him. Even if he called the police, it had nothing to do with me. However, Han, who was there to report on the work progress, overheard the commotion and couldn't help but speak up. "The last time I saw Margarita, she was with General Manager Kim. They seemed pretty close." I frowned. General Manager Kim was the person the headquarters had assigned to liaise with me domestically. Why would Margarita be involved with him? Before I could think too much, Han quickly clarified. "Margarita approached General Manager Kim. I'm not sure if she drugged him or if it was his doing, but the two of them have been together frequently." Han also sent me a video of Kim and Margarita eating together. He looked worried as he added, "I'm not sure if Margarita has any more plans for the company." Kim was in charge of the domestic subsidiary, and I was sent from the overseas headquarters, so this situation could be tricky. I nodded, acknowledging what he said, then forwarded the video to Santiago. If he was concerned about Margarita's safety, he should see that Margarita was already pursuing another man. I was curious about how he would react. That evening, trouble erupted. After a meeting with Han, we were heading to a nearby restaurant when we saw Margarita being dragged out of a private room by an elegantly dressed middle-aged woman. Her small Chanel coat had been torn, and she was badly bruised. The crowd around her snapping pictures, but General Manager Kim was nowhere to be seen. "You damn fox. How dare you seduce my husband? You bitch. Who do you think you are? You're nothing but a cheap slut. After you've had your fun, what else do you want?" Margarita, beaten and bloodied, managed to get to her feet. When she saw Santiago in the crowd, she lunged toward him, furiously yelling, "Santiago, this is all your fault. You've already ruined me. And now I finally get close to General Manager Kim, and you stab me in the back." Santiago slapped her hard across the face, his expression contorted with rage. "How dare you blame me? You told me to beg Steven for help, but how did you end up in the bed of some old man? I called you so many times. I almost knelt down to find you, and you betrayed me. You bitch." Margarita's lip bled as she glared at Santiago, then lunged at his face, clawing at him, straddling him as they began fighting. "If it weren't for you, Steven wouldn't have broken up with me. You're just a kept boy. Who are you to tell me who I sleep with? We were just a casual fling. Did you really think you were my man? Are you an idiot?" Margarita had trained with me in boxing for 2 years, and she fought dirty, landing heavy blows on Santiago. But Santiago, in pain and enraged by her insults, snapped. He started pounding his fists into Margarita's body. Chapter 9. I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. The dog-eat-dog drama was, as expected, quite entertaining. At that moment, the police arrived, separated the two, and took them away, dispersing the crowd. A week later, Margarita was released, while Santiago was still locked up. I wasn't concerned about their affairs, but a month later, at a business collaboration meeting, I ran into Margarita. She was arm in arm with an older man, acting as if she were the mistress of the house. It wasn't General Manager Kim, but Pablo, a business owner interested in cooperation. "Fancy meeting you here, Steven. I heard you're after my husband's project. If you kneel and beg me right now, I might consider it." I frowned as I looked at her. Margarita still looked beautiful, but her aura now exuded a kind of sly allure. She gazed at me arrogantly, as if she still saw me as just a dog, submissive to her every whim. I ignored her completely. From what I heard from friends, Margarita had seduced Pablo within just a week, but I found this odd. Pablo was well known in the industry for being driven solely by profit. Given his age, experience, and social status, he had seen every kind of woman. Why would he be interested in Margarita? I had someone investigate. Sure enough, something suspicious came up. After Margarita got close to Pablo, his company rapidly secured several key projects. These projects were ones that had previously been of interest to General Manager Kim. Upon further investigation, I learned that Margarita had stolen commercial secrets from Kim. She had used this information to strike a deal with Pablo. Of course, I wasn't about to let this slide. After gathering the evidence, I submitted it to the court, filing charges against Margarita for stealing commercial secrets. When Margarita found out, she stormed into my company, demanding answers. She cursed at me furiously. "Steven, get out here, you despicable bastard. What did I ever do to you for you to ruin my life like this? I must have been blind to have been with such a disgusting man." When I went out to confront her, she tried to push and shove me. The security guards immediately stopped her. I coldly stared at her and said, "Margarita, everything that's happening is the result of your own actions. If you really had a clear conscience, why would you be causing all this trouble?" At that moment, all I felt for Margarita was disgust and revulsion. A woman so selfish and willing to do anything to achieve her goals. I had wasted 10 years of my life on her. "Throw her out," I coldly ordered, then turned and went back to work. A week later, the court delivered its judgment. Margarita was sentenced to 5 years. General Manager Kim was also suspended from his position due to his involvement with Margarita, and I temporarily took over all his responsibilities. When Margarita was released from court, I was just about to get into my car when I saw a limping figure approaching me. As the figure came closer, I saw that it was Santiago. His once handsome face had become rough, covered in stubble, and worn with age. There was a deep scar across his face. I couldn't help but furrow my brow. I wondered if the scar was from that street fight he had with Margarita. But his limp. Chapter 10. "Santiago," I called out. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with regret. "Steven, I came here to apologize. Years ago, I took your projects and made you the scapegoat, stealing your position. I'm sorry. After spending time in jail, I've had a lot of time to reflect. Margarita brought all of this upon herself, and I, too, am just as guilty. I wish you all the best." I looked at him, confused. I couldn't understand why he was suddenly confessing to me. Tears suddenly welled up in Santiago's eyes. His voice trembled slightly. "I loved her so much. I thought if I took her from you, I could have everything. I was just a fool, wasn't I?" With a bitter laugh, he shook his head and turned to leave. Since then, I never saw Santiago again. Margarita, however, sent someone to pass on a message asking if I could visit her, claiming she was lonely. I paid no attention to it. I had long since severed ties with her, and her life was no longer my concern. 5 years later, my company's value had grown exponentially, and the headquarters officially appointed me as the head of the domestic branch. My career was shining bright. Later, I heard from mutual friends that Margarita had been released from prison. Her mental state had deteriorated, and she was taken back to her hometown by her family, where she married and had children. As for me, my future continued to unfold, and I intended to live the rest of my life for myself.